Robert, you sent me one of the most simple, head-snapping texts I've ever received about a year ago. The system is not only bankrupt, it's corrupt.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. And today we have some really bad news about this stuff here. It's called the dollar. It's called toilet paper. It's called fiat. It really should have been F-A-K-E, fake money. And what we're talking about here today is these are my four people I do buy from. And I buy for them for different reasons because they have different, the subject of money and gold, and this is gold and this is silver. They're massive subjects. Gold and silver have been around for 5,000 years. And so today when I meet those young kids who are stackers, and they think they're Donald Trump stacking, 500 silvers, I kind of back off because they lose the reason for it. So once again, this is part two of a 4-part series, the most important show you could watch, because I cringe every time some young guy comes up to me and says, "Oh, I'm doing as I told. I'm buying real estate." And I look at this guy and said, I recommend 25 years ago I was in real estate. Real estate's coming down. No, it's not. No, it's not. Or I talked to the guy who does my hair. I said, why are you working for this here? Why don't you buy a silver? No. And again, it goes back to this book here called The Grunch of Giants by Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller, created the geodesic dome. I studied with him for 3 years, 81, 82, 83. 84, he wrote this book. Grunch stands for Gross Universal Cash Heist. How our wealth is stolen via our money, inflation, and taxes. And America was founded as a tax-free nation. But as Fuller says in here, our school teachers are the problem. Our school teachers know nothing about money. They're like my poor dad, PhD, poor, helpless, desperate, and broke. And when my dad died broke, after pounding on me for years to get my PhD, I said, "Dad, if I get a PhD, I'll just wind up like you, broke." But as you guys just noticed just recently, we had the cast of 3, the head of Harvard, MIT, and UPenn. It's about time our government cracked down on the communist organization called higher education. And as I talk about, we don't know anything about money. It's not a mistake. That's exactly what Fuller was saying here. So the problem is right now we're on the edge of destruction, because it's not so much that this gold is important or silver important, but America today is the biggest debtor nation in history. We cannot print any more money. And if you believe the Fed, the Treasury, or Biden, I call them the 3 stooges, I don't know how you can believe them. So for all these years, I've been saying, buy silver. I started buying silver in 64. I bought my first gold coin in 72 in Hong Kong, because in 72, it was illegal for Americans to own gold. Imagine that. In 72, it was illegal for Americans to own gold. And what I had to do, I had to fly this little baby here, my helicopter, behind enemy lines to buy my first bit of gold here. But that's how much our government and our school teachers don't want you to own gold or silver. This is about $35 today. This is about $2,200. I bought my first one, it was $50. I still have it. It's stored in a vault someplace outside of Switzerland. I don't keep my gold and silver at home because they just might confiscate it. So with that, this is part 2 of a 4-part series. These are the people I actually buy from. I buy from them because this is not as important as their information and their knowledge and their experience. So they're like the 4 wise men up there. So my question today, this part 2, is what do you think is the fate of the US dollar? Because a little history again, I think it was 1944 that this thing here was backed by gold. Then in 71, Nixon took it off. And now we're the biggest debtor nation in the world. I heard estimate, I was never good at math in school, but it's $1 trillion in interest just to pay our debt. So it's nothing to do with gold or silver or your PhD. We're being run by the three stooges, Larry, Moe, and Joe, Biden, Yellen, and Powell. Our country is broke. That's why Andy was talking about being patriots. I fought for this country. But the problem is our school teachers run the show. They're Marxist. They should have read this book here. So with that said, Andy, what happened? What do you think the fate of the U.S. dollar is? But you said something to me when I first met you about what Afghanistan meant. And the reason Afghanistan meant a lot was we left behind, I don't know how many billions of dollars of equipment for the enemy. Biden did that. That man should go to jail for that, leaving all that equipment.
86 billion. 86 billion was the number I've heard from Trump.
Anyway, we'll never know. I know because I was part of 1974. I had to abandon equipment in Vietnam because we lost. So it's a little more personal, Jim. Okay. When you see your stuff being taken over, you go, holy mackerel. I went back to Vietnam a few years ago, and the hangars and the revetments we stored our helicopters in now have Chinese comm stars on them. We gave up to the communists, just as we gave up to the school teachers for this here. So, Andy, what happened in Afghanistan that's fired you up?
Yeah, well, over 300 years ago, to your main question, Voltaire said all paper currencies eventually return to their intrinsic value, which is zero, and the U.S. dollar will be no different. And look, to your point, Robert, the world is changing so much more quickly than most Americans understand, and because of that, there's virtually no coverage. Mainstream media, to Buckminster Fuller's point, you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. So what did happen in August or September of 2021? And let's preempt that by saying maybe the biggest event, certainly I think cumulatively in all of our careers, was the Bank of International Settlement 2 years before that, reclassifying gold as the only other tier one reserve asset. Let me say that one more time. Since the end of 1944, Robert, as you mentioned, the dollar was the world reserve currency, a tier one reserve asset. The BIS, which is the central banker's central bank, the most powerful bank on the planet, said, oh, by the way, now gold is a tier one asset too. And that should not be lost in any of these discussions. But what happened when we left Afghanistan in a way that was very, in my opinion, un-American? We left 3,000, if I'm not mistaken, Americans behind enemy lines. We left even almost as or maybe even worse, the freedom fighters and the translators and all of these people we promised visas. We left them behind. And the timing of the announcement that happened 7 days later should not be understated. I think it is not coincidental when Saudi Arabia and Russia signed a joint military cooperation agreement. And that's significant in the respect that in 1973, when the deal was struck between Kissinger and the Saudis for what makes the dollar the petrodollar, it was, we will protect the Saudi kingdom and by extension, OPEC. And as a result of that, OPEC will value oil in dollars globally and take those dollars and recycle them into the treasury market. Now, we don't have to talk about how the treasuries have done.
Eddie, hold on 1 second. The reason this is important, because this is my study also, is in 74, I believe it was 74, the dollar became the petrodollar because Nixon took this out of this here.
Right.
Now, the question is, after they took petrol off of it, what became a tier one asset then?
Just gold, and that was in 2019.
I think it was bonds, debt.
Well, that was the bonds and the dollars were considered tier one asset. That's correct, and they still are to this day.
Please understand this, Andy. When I talk to friends out there, they go, "What's a tier one asset? What does that mean?" I said, it was called a treasury, a bond, and to me, bonds are as worse as this.
Well, you're right. From a
Yeah.
historical standpoint, government debt has a very shallow history as being an asset.
That's what I'm saying.
And that,
So,
yeah, that's right. And so right now there are three
okay,
tier
so
one
let me-
assets as far as government's concerned.
yeah, hang on, Andy. I'll go set up to you. So when the bond became, after all this stuff, bond became the number one asset in the world, how come banks started to collapse? What happened to
Well,
Silver and Silvergate and SVB and all that?
so all of these banks were incentivized. When you deposit money into a bank, it's an asset of you, the depositor. It is a liability of the bank, and the banks have to offset that liability with an asset. Traditionally, it's 10-year treasuries because they are so liquid and so riskless, everyone thought. And that was with interest rates that had been at zero on the federal funds rate for nearly a decade.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Kiyosaki, co-host of the Rich Dad Radio Show. And I want to thank today's sponsor, our friends at Gold Alliance. You know, we should all be concerned about high inflation, a looming recession, the very troubled banking system, and out-of-control spending in Washington. And the fact is, during every major crisis in U.S. history, many of those who failed to prepare watched their savings, investments, and retirement funds plummet, while others with the foresight to own gold helped preserve their wealth and purchasing power. Now, we're facing several major crises at once, and we may soon face even more economic turmoil. So please don't wait. Consider gold and put yourself on the road to financial peace of mind. The new free 2023 Gold Guide from our friends at Gold Alliance can show you how. Just visit www.freegoldguide.com/Robert or call 1-800-473-4585. Republican governor and conservative commentator Mike Huckabee says Gold Alliance is the only gold provider he recommends to his friends and family. Please visit freegoldguide.com/Robert or call now at 1-800-473-4585. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Kiyosaki, co-host of the Rich Dad Radio Show. Robert and I have warned that 2023 was going to be a roller coaster of volatility. After all, the stock market is largely flat this year, except for a handful of tech companies. And other asset classes are struggling to meet expectations. One survey reveals that living paycheck to paycheck is the most common lifestyle in America, even for those making six-figure incomes. Combined with hundreds of thousands of layoffs in just the last few months, it's clear a financial storm is brewing. The question to ask yourself is, are you safe? For years, Robert and I and other investors have been putting more and more money into assets that can still climb when the stock market flatlines. One investment that doesn't seem to be affected by the ups and downs of the stock market is art. In fact, one of our close friends and advisor recommends art as his number one asset protection. Even more, contemporary art prices have outpaced the S&P 500's total return over the last 27 years by 136%. If you think art as an investment is something you want to pursue, then there is a vehicle that allows you to do that without investing millions, thanks to Masterworks, our longtime sponsor. Their platform lets you invest in shares of painting by icons like Picasso and Banksy. Masterworks now has $800 million in assets under management. But thanks to our friends at Masterworks, you can skip their waitlist. Just click the link in the description for this episode. Offerings have sold out in minutes, but Rich Dad listeners can skip the waitlist going to masterworks.art/richdad. That's masterworks.art/richdad. See important disclosures at masterworks.com/CD.
Feeling powerless over current events and your financial future? Financial freedom is your freedom. Robert Kiyosaki is the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Over 40 million people have taken Robert's advice. Now it's your turn. Attend Robert's free virtual wealth building event. Claim your free access now at richdadfree.com. Don't wait, access is limited. Go to richdadfree.com. That's richdadfree.com.
The reason this is hot for me, because I just got out of Vietnam in 74. There was a thing called the 401k was just coming out in 1974. And And so I applied to be a financial planner. And those stupid fucking financial planners started to tell me that bonds were safe. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Now, I had just come back from Vietnam flying this thing around the place looking at gold. And bonds are not safe. But the American public has been taught to buy this stuff here, paper, and then bonds, which are debt. So this is why I get so hot when a financial planner tells me it's called the 60-40. 60% equities, 40% bonds. Then they have people believing bonds are safe. Are they safe?
Well, when interest rates go nowhere but down since 1982, they certainly have been safe and have been very liquid. But as interest rates begin to move the other direction, it starts to take on a whole different view. And when you see interest rates rising, coupled with the fact that all of these banks have been allowed to maintain virtually nothing in the way of reserve requirements, when the depositors say, give me back my money, the banks don't have it on hand. They are forced to sell those bonds that have lost 40 and 50 cents on the dollar as interest rates have moved up so rapidly with 11 straight interest rate hikes.
And keep it simple. Bonds are not safe. Okay,
they're not safe anymore. That is exactly right. They're not. But they were always considered the safest asset on the planet.
One more thing. So then Andy called me and says, Credit Suisse is going down. And then he called Credit Suisse, the Swiss banking system was the best in the world. The Swiss banking system is going down because their bonds are going down. And our financial planners are still telling you it's safe as bonds. That's all I'm trying to do is have people wake up, because our school teachers are definitely not going to tell you that, because that's what they work for. Go ahead, Charles.
Well, I appreciate Andy's deconstruction of the bond market back in the 80s, but the essential thing to remember in the current environment is this, that all of these instruments are promises to pay. All of these instruments will pay you based on the contingency that the people who issued them are able to, that they don't defraud you, that the state doesn't intervene and screw everything up, or that they can. So in the current environment in which everything is falling apart and in which the center of our economic structure is not holding, the most important thing to remember is that you don't want to own somebody else's liability. Sometimes bonds are good, sometimes they're bad, but right now, all promises to pay are fraught with risk. You look at this country. Look, the Biden administration just ran the largest monthly deficit in the history of America, $314 billion for 1 month. Oh, there must have been a shortfall in revenue. No, there wasn't a shortfall in revenue. Revenue was up 9%. Income was up to the state, and yet the deficit was the largest monthly deficit in history. I'm telling you that all of these promises to pay, no matter who the issuer is, are contingent. It's like a game of Django. People are pulling little blocks out here and there, and the whole thing is on the verge of toppling over. The rubber band has been stretched to its logical extreme,
Charles,
and it can't be stretched anymore.
We got to keep it simple, okay? The reason I make the fucking big bucks is I just get it down to where I can understand it. But the reason I call you guys is sometimes you guys know too much. Just keep it simple. You know, like when my financial planner told me bonds are safe, I said, I'm going to find somebody else, because I understand counterparty risk, because I was one of the few guys flying these things behind enemy lines looking for this. I understand this stuff. Let's keep it simple, okay? So Dana, how safe are our bonds compared to a gold coin?
Well, the gold coin is much more offers much more safety in a rapidly changing interest rate environment, and we've seen that obviously with the failure.
Wait, Dana, it's not interest paying. It's
right. It's debt. So
they just create more debt because bond. Wait, you guys, the ABCs of finance. A bond is debt. And America is now the biggest debtor nation in the world. and you're gonna buy a bond? You fucking nuts? That's what
But it's all
I
debt.
just
It's all debt. Whether it's the dollar bill, it's a debt instrument.
thank
Whether it's a
you.
bond, it's a debt instrument. A treasury bill, that's a debt
Thank you.
instrument. The only thing that's not a debt instrument are the gold coins that you're holding and the silver coins that you're
Amen.
holding. You have those outside the system. It's off the radar.
That's Jim.
It's the tier one asset that we talked about before.
Thank you. This is what I want people to understand. Sometimes when I come to you guys, I've got to get out my dictionary and reach. If you read this book here, and you read this book here, Grunch, the school teachers are complicit. That's why they say we should pay taxes when America was founded as a debt-free nation. A tax-free nation. And our dollar became debt in 71. And then they tell
Well,
us
sure, the Revolutionary War was all about that taxes. They wanted to put a 2% tax on tea.
Yeah.
And we said, no, nothing doing.
Right.
And there was a war fought over it. Now at 50%, 60%,
Yeah.
everybody's okay.
Jim,
Well, that's the way it is.
Keep it simple. Okay. Dana.
Robert, you sent me one of the most simple, head-snapping texts I've ever received about a year ago. The system is not only bankrupt, it's corrupt.
Right.
And you made me rethink everything that I've been ingrained in my mind over 40 years of education and business and programming by the system. Now, I could see the debt go from $5 trillion in 1995 that took us 200 years to accumulate. Now we're 6 times higher, over $33 trillion in debt. The value of gold is multiplied almost the same amount, from $400 an ounce to $2,000 an ounce during this time period. And it's not that the dollar has, the gold is gaining so much to the dollar, it's that the dollar's losing purchasing power.
Yeah, I understand. Guys, keep it, please.
Right.
We've got 3 more shows. You can tell your customers that stuff.
But the system is bankrupt and corrupt. You're correct about that.
This is my question for episode 2. What is the fate of the U.S. dollar? Can we just keep printing money? Charles, can we keep printing money?
They can try, but it always ends very, very badly. And it ends badly for the people that hold their money in U.S. dollars and paper assets.
Just fucking yes or no. You know what I mean? I've got to talk to these guys. They call my brothers and sisters. Oh, we saved this. I wipe my butt with it. That's the difference. 64, I started saving these things that you gave me, $50, because there was no copper in it. It's that simple. Look, if we got to keep it simple, you guys, people are saving money. They're working for money. They think their job's an asset. They think their house is an asset. And Andy, I don't know if you just saw it, but there's a big expose on the condominiums of Florida going down because of insurance. Real estate is not safe. Okay.
I did see that.
Yeah.
I think here's a way to keep it very simple. Look, for people to understand, the national debt is growing so rapidly that our own government, the Congressional Budget Office, said that by 2031, which is 7 years away, interest on the debt plus mandatory entitlement spending like Social Security will consume 100% of federal tax revenue in 7 years. So what does that mean? That means that the entire discretionary budget of the United States, including the military, will have to be borrowed. So how are we going to be the dominant superpower politically and militarily if we have to borrow money even to finance our military in 7 years?
Amen.
The answer is no. You cannot continue this path.
Well, back to your question about can we keep printing money? The answer is absolutely no. And even Alan Greenspan, the corrupt Fed chairman, said all fiat money returns to gold.
Yeah.
So do the math on the price of gold at $2,000 versus $20 in 1930. We're operating on a 1 cent dollar. How long can that go? That when that 1 cent is gone?
Okay. Jim, keep it fucking simple. I have other people to give time to. So Dana, what happened in 1933?
We made gold illegal to own in the United States in 1935. We confiscated the gold in 1933. We took it out of the monetary system, and the rest of the world followed suit, which allowed politicians for the first time to print more money than we had gold in currency. That's where really the root of the problem started.
So is that why many people run to you? Because isn't there some kind of rule that if it's before 1933, they can't confiscate it?
Collector coins of value 15% or more over their gold value were not confiscatable at the time. Most had no collector value back then, but today a lot of them do. So we do sell a lot of pre-1933 US $20 gold coins, like Jim was talking about in part one, as a result, because they are theoretically exempt from a future confiscation.
So I think, Charles and Jim give me these $50 here. I hand them out to all my friends because it's pre-64. The date means a lot in history. And Andy gave me one of these things, 1933. That's what I'm talking about. I buy from these guys. I'm not saying you should. I'm not recommending you buy gold or silver. But I buy from these guys because they're not little silver stackers. These guys know the history of how we've been fucked by our own government over all these years. So, gentlemen, thank you. We'll come back for part 3 next time. But we're getting down to, we just keep it super simple so people can get off their asses and start wiping their butt with this stuff, because that's all it's going to be worth in a few years. Thank you.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.